Hello and welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, once again guest hosting this week on Take Action News. July 20th, 2013. We have an incredible hour ahead of us. Of course, we're going to open the second hour, as we often do, in talking about the latest developments in the fight to bring greater workplace safety standards to Bangladesh, which, of course, is the world's second largest exporter of apparel. And it's the site of the Rana Plaza disaster just a few months ago, where 1,127 workers were killed in what is believed to be the largest factory collapse in modern industrial history in an apparel factory complex over there. We've reported on the fact that just last week, many of the North American retailers who were refusing to sign a binding legal accord called the Accord on Factory and Fire and Workplace Safety in Bangladesh, that was negotiated and essentially drafted by international labor organizations, Bangladeshi unions, human rights organizations. Many North American retailers, including Walmart and Gap, the two largest importers from Bangladesh in North America, were refusing to sign that because they didn't want the legal liability of what happens when things go wrong in Bangladesh. They didn't want something mandatory, something enforceable. They wanted voluntary inspections. And they wanted those inspections and the guidelines for those drafted in coordination with industry officials, but not union officials, the workers that have a stake in the effects of that case. Well, there were more developments on that front this past week. As it was reported in the New York Times by Steve Greenhouse, their labor reporter, the Bangladeshi government did respond finally. Of course, the U.S. government had revoked the preferential trade treatment given to Bangladesh through the generalized system of preferences, which meant that Bangladesh had lower tariffs for some 5,000 exports from Bangladesh. Of course, those exports were not from the apparel industry, but the thinking was that pressure on any part of the Bangladeshi exports would bring pressure brought to bear on the Bangladeshi government to enact stricter, more rigorous safety standards. The Bangladeshi government responded this week by giving some protection for workers calling out safety problems in their factories and for workers' rights to unionize. They officially outlawed naming workers who had joined unions for retaliation, and that those union elections could be kept private. It's not exactly clear how that would be the case. I think the concerns of many labor officials, many labor and human rights officials, is that those standards will be easily circumvented, that people will be bribed, that these factory owners will find ways to infiltrate these worker networks. They also wanted a lower threshold for unionization. The Bangladeshi government gave them 30%, and that therefore you could have a union recognized if it represented 30% of the workers. I don't think that means it would be a bargaining unit for every worker in that factory, but the unions wanted 10%, knowing just how difficult it is in the environment there in the developing world with some of the political power that these garment industry executives had. They did not get that. And apparently, some workers in the Bangladeshi industrial world were forbade from joining unions altogether, hospital workers, educational workers, some kinds of public sector workers. And there's concern that in some ways, this bill is even more insidious.